The cards fell in David's favor for the seventh time that night, and the three Saurian nobles across the table looked ready to bite through their own scaled lips. Their golden eyes burned with fury as David pulled the pile of credit chips toward himself, his weathered hands moving slowly, almost apologetically. He never meant to win this much. He just needed enough to pay for the converter parts his ship desperately needed. "You cheat," hissed the largest Saurian, his crest flaring deep crimson. His name was something unpronounceable, full of clicks and growls that David's human throat could never manage. No soft skin wins 7 hands against the House of Vermilion Crest. David kept his voice level, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "I don't cheat. Just lucky tonight, I guess." He started to stand, ready to walk away before things turned violent. The orbital station above Draconic 7 had security, but they rarely intervened when humans got into trouble with the locals. Humans were guests here, tolerated but not protected. The second Saurian, smaller but with sharper teeth visible in his sneer, placed a clawed hand on the table. "Wait, you want payment, yes? We are honorable. We pay our debts." The way he said it made David's stomach clench with worry. "We give you prize from our stables. A dragon of your very own." The third Saurian began laughing, a sound like rocks grinding together.
Yes. A dragon for the human."
This is perfect. David knew enough about dragon culture to understand this was not generosity. Dragons were worth fortunes. They were used in warfare, in racing, in displays of wealth and power across 100 worlds. No one gave away a dragon to settle a gambling debt worth maybe 3,000 credits. That's not necessary. "I'll just take what I want and—" No, we insist." The large Saurian stood, his massive frame towering over David's 6 feet. Come now. We show you your prize." His companions were already moving toward the exit, their tails swishing with barely contained amusement. David followed because refusing a Saurian's offer, especially in front of a crowd, was a good way to start a blood feud. The gambling hall was connected to the station's outer ring, where the wealthy kept their private hangars and luxury suites. They led him through corridors that grew progressively darker and less maintained. The smell changed too, from the sterile recycled air of the station proper to something organic and unpleasant. They reached a section David had never seen before. The lighting was dim, powered by emergency strips. Cages lined the walls, most of them empty. A few contained shapes that moved sluggishly in the darkness. The Saurians walked quickly now, their laughter growing louder. "Here." The smallest one stopped before a cage in the corner, barely large enough to hold a small cargo container. "Your prize." David stepped closer, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. At first he saw nothing but shadow. Then the shape moved and he understood why they were laughing. She was small for a dragon, maybe the size of an old earth horse. Her scales were pure white, not the healthy ivory of albino creatures he had seen in pictures, but a sickly, yellowish white like old bone. She pressed herself against the far corner of the cage, one wing tucked tight against her body, the other hanging at an odd angle. Her head was lowered, and when she lifted it slightly to look at them, David saw that one eye was clouded white with blindness. The other eye, pale gold, held nothing but fear and resignation. "This is Ash," the large Saurian said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Failed breeding experiment. Weak genetics. Blind in one eye. Wing membrane torn beyond healing. Cannot fly, cannot fight, cannot breed. We were going to dispose of her next week, but now she is your problem instead." The 3 Saurians erupted in fresh laughter, slapping each other's shoulders and tails. David moved closer to the cage, ignoring them. The dragon watched him with her one good eye, and he saw intelligence there, buried under layers of pain and hopelessness. Her scales were scarred, some missing entirely. Her claws were overgrown from lack of use. She had not walked properly in a long time. "How long has she been in here?" David asked quietly. 3 years, one of the Saurians answered, still chuckling. "Maybe 4. "Who counts?" "She eats little, makes no sound." Easy to forget. David felt something hot and angry rise in his chest. He had seen this before in different forms. Broken equipment left to rust because fixing it was harder than buying new. Injured workers cast aside because they could not keep up. He had been one of those workers once after the accident that took his arm. He understood what it meant to be deemed worthless. "I'll take her," David said. The laughter stopped. The large Saurian stared at him. "You, what?" "I said I'll take her. That's my prize. I want her." David met the Saurian's gaze without flinching. The 3 aliens exchanged confused glances. This was supposed to be a joke, a final insult. The human was supposed to refuse, to walk away in disgust. You understand she is worthless? She will die soon anyway. Waste of food and space. I understand she's mine now. I need transport authorization and transfer papers. David pulled out his datapad, ready to make it official. The Saurians, baffled and slightly disappointed that their joke had backfired, processed the paperwork with sullen efficiency. Within an hour, David had legal ownership of one crippled albino dragon named Ash. The transport cost to his workshop on Station Meridian would eat up most of his winnings. But he did not care. When the Saurians finally left, still muttering about crazy humans, David approached the cage alone. He knelt down slowly, making himself small and non-threatening. The dragon had not moved. She watched him with that one golden eye, waiting for pain, for cruelty, for the inevitable end. "Hey there, Ash," David said softly, his crude prosthetic arm resting on his knee. The joint made a small whirring sound as it moved. "I know you've been hurt. I know you think nobody cares. But I'm going to get you out of here. And if you'll let me, I'm going to help you fly again." The dragon blinked slowly. She did not believe him. Why would she? But somewhere in that pale gold eye something flickered. Not hope, not yet. But perhaps the smallest possibility that maybe, just maybe, this strange soft skin was different from the others. David smiled, though his heart ached at what he saw before him. He had no idea how he would fix this. He barely had enough credits to keep his own workshop running. But he had made a promise, and David Ross never walked away from broken things. Not when he knew exactly what it felt like to be one. Getting Ash to his workshop took 3 days and cost David nearly every credit he had left. The transport company wanted extra fees for live cargo, especially a dragon. They wanted hazard pay. They wanted insurance deposits. By the time the cargo container arrived at Station Meridian's docking bay, David was surviving on nutrient paste and water. His workshop sat in the industrial sector, a cramped space barely large enough for his repair bench, storage lockers, and a small living area he had carved out behind a partition wall. The rent was cheap because the environmental systems were unreliable, and the walls were thin enough to hear every ship that docked 3 bays over. It was home, and now he had to make room for a dragon. Ash emerged from the transport container like a ghost. She moved slowly, painfully dragging her damaged wing behind her. In better lighting, David could see the full extent of her condition, and it was worse than he thought. Ribs showed clearly through her thin scales. Open sores marked places where she had lain in the same position too long. Her claws scraped against the metal floor as she limped forward, and the sound made David's teeth ache. She hissed when he approached, a weak sound that held more fear than threat. Her good eye darted around the workshop, searching for danger, for escape routes, for anything familiar in this strange new place. "Easy," David murmured, staying low, moving slow. "You're safe here, I promise." He had cleared out the back corner of the workshop, laying down every blanket and soft material he owned. It was not much, but it was better than a cage. Ash made her way to the corner and collapsed, her legs folding under her like they could not hold her weight another second. She tucked her head under her good wing and did not move again for hours. David got to work. First priority was food and water. He had researched dragon nutrition on the transport ride over, draining his datapad's battery twice, reading everything he could find. Dragons were obligate carnivores, requiring specific proteins and minerals. The cheapest option was processed meat blocks from the station commissary, fortified with supplements. He bought enough for a week and hoped he could figure out how to afford more before they ran out. He placed a bowl of water and small chunks of meat near Ash, but not too close. She ignored them. Hours passed. The meat sat untouched. David forced himself to sleep for a few hours, and when he woke, the food was gone and Ash was watching him from her corner, her golden eye reflecting the dim emergency lights he kept on at night. The next few days fell into a careful pattern. David worked on repair jobs for other station residents, fixing broken machinery, welding cracked hull plates, programming navigation systems. Anything to earn credits. Between jobs, he sat near Ash, talking to her in a low, steady voice. He told her about his work, about the station, about nothing and everything. She never responded, but she listened. He could tell by the way her ear frills would shift toward the sound of his voice. On the fourth day, he tried to examine her injuries. He approached with his medical scanner, moving slowly, explaining every step. I just need to see how bad it is, girl. Won't hurt, I promise. Just a scan, that's all. Ash lunged at him, snapping with teeth that could easily tear through his arm. David jerked back, his heart racing. She retreated to her corner, shaking, her breathing rapid and panicked. Okay, David said, forcing his voice to stay calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Okay, I understand. No scanning yet. We'll wait. That's fine. He noticed his prosthetic arm was shaking. The cheap servos in the elbow joint were acting up again, making the whole limb twitch randomly. He had built it himself after the accident, cobbling together parts from junked maintenance drones and industrial equipment. It worked mostly, but it was far from perfect. Sometimes it locked up completely. Sometimes it moved when he did not want it to. A proper prosthetic would cost more than he made in 5 years. Ash was watching his arm with her good eye, her head tilted slightly. The twitching seemed to fascinate her. Yeah, it's broken, David said, following her gaze. Like you. Like me. He held up the arm, let her see how the metal plating did not quite fit right, how the joints were mismatched pieces that did not belong together. Lost the original in a shipyard accident. Plasma cutter malfunction. Company said it was my fault for not following safety protocols. No compensation, no support. Just a medical discharge and a bill for the emergency surgery. He lowered the arm, the servos whining softly. That's when I learned something important. The galaxy doesn't care about broken things. If you can't work, can't fight, can't be useful, you get thrown away. But you know what? They're wrong. Broken doesn't mean worthless. It just means we have to work harder to prove we still matter. Ash made a sound, soft and uncertain, somewhere between a whine and a rumble. It was the first vocalization he had heard from her beyond hisses and fear responses. I'm going to help you, David continued. But I need you to trust me. I know that's hard. I know people have hurt you, but I'm not them. I see you, Ash, not a failed experiment, not a waste of resources. I see someone who deserves a chance. Progress came in small moments. Ash started eating while David was in the room. She stopped hissing when he approached. One morning, he woke to find she had moved closer to his sleeping area during the night, still keeping her distance but no longer hiding in the furthest corner. 2 weeks after her arrival, Dr. Isla Grant knocked on the workshop door. She was a xenobiologist who worked in the station's research sector, someone David had done a few repair jobs for. She was older, her dark hair streaked with gray, and she had the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much suffering. I heard you brought a dragon to the station, Isla said, peering past David into the workshop. May I see her? David hesitated, protective. She's been through a lot. Doesn't like strangers. I specialize in dragon physiology. Published 3 papers on their flight biomechanics. I might be able to help. Isla's voice was gentle, professional. No charge. I'm just curious. David let her in, and for the next hour, Isla observed Ash from a distance, occasionally asking questions. She did not try to approach or touch. She just watched, taking notes on a datapad. Finally, Isla turned to David, her expression troubled. The wing damage is extensive. The membrane is shredded and scarred. It will never heal naturally. And that's not even the worst part. She pulled up a diagram on her datapad. Dragons have an electromagnetic organ in their chest, right here. It interacts with planetary magnetic fields to assist with flight. Hers is damaged, possibly from malnutrition or genetic defect. Even if you fix the wing, she couldn't fly. The organ won't function properly. David felt something cold settle in his stomach. So it's impossible. I didn't say impossible, Isla corrected. I said it won't heal naturally. There are other options. Prosthetics, augmentation, artificial field generators. But they're expensive and experimental. No one's ever tried to retrofit a dragon before. David looked at Ash, curled in her corner, watching them with her wary golden eye. Would she survive the procedures? Physically, probably. But she's traumatized and malnourished. Surgery would be risky. Isla paused, studying David. Why are you doing this? You know she's not valuable. You could surrender her to the station authorities. They'd euthanize her humanely. She's not broken beyond repair, David said firmly. She's just broken in ways no one's been willing to fix. Isla smiled faintly. You're either very compassionate or very stubborn. Can't it be both? Over the following weeks, Isla visited regularly. bringing medical supplies and advice. David began the slow process of physical therapy with Ash, gentle stretches of her damaged wing, exercises to build back atrophied muscle. He documented everything, learning her limits, celebrating tiny victories when she could extend her wing a few inches further than the day before. The breakthrough came on a rainy night, the kind of artificial rain the station generated to clean the exterior surfaces. David was working on his arm, trying to repair a seized elbow joint. He had the casing open, his tools spread out. Ash had been watching from her corner as she often did. Then she stood. She limped across the workshop, something she rarely did without prompting. David froze, afraid to startle her. She stopped beside him, lowered her head, and gently touched her snout to his broken arm. It was the first time she had initiated contact. David felt something break open in his chest, relief and hope and a dozen other emotions he could not name. Slowly, carefully, he raised his other hand and touched her scarred neck. She did not pull away. "We're going to figure this out," David whispered. "Together." Ash made that soft rumbling sound again, and this time David understood. It was not fear. It was not pain. It was the sound of someone daring to hope. 3 months into their partnership, David sat surrounded by failed prototypes. Pieces of twisted metal and shattered composite materials littered the workshop floor. His savings account showed a number so low it made his stomach hurt. He had sold his personal tools, his backup generator, even the spare parts he had been hoarding for his ship. All of it had gone into materials for Ash's wing support frame. The dragon herself had grown stronger. Proper food and care had filled out her frame. Her scales, while still pale, now had a healthy sheen. The sores had healed. She moved with more confidence, and sometimes David caught her trying to extend both wings, a reflex she could not quite suppress. But the damaged wing still hung wrong, the membrane too scarred and twisted to catch air. David picked up the latest prototype, a lightweight frame meant to attach to her wing structure. It had taken him 2 weeks to design and build. He had used salvaged titanium from a scrapped mining drone, shaped and welded it with precision that had left his good hand aching, and his prosthetic smoking from overuse. It was beautiful in its way. It was also completely wrong. "The weight distribution is off," he muttered, turning the frame over. Even if it attached correctly, it would throw her balance off mid-flight. He set it down with the others, another failure in a growing collection. Ash made a questioning sound from her corner. She had learned to read his moods, could tell when he was frustrated or discouraged. "I'm fine, girl," David lied. "Just need to think differently." But thinking differently required resources he did not have and knowledge he was still scrambling to acquire. The workshop door chimed, and Isla entered carrying a heavy case. She had been visiting twice a week, bringing medical supplies and offering advice. Today she looked excited, her usual professional composure cracked by enthusiasm. "I found something," she said, setting the case on David's workbench. "Remember when I said dragons have electromagnetic organs? I've been researching the old texts, pre-colonization documents from their homeworld. Dragons didn't evolve to fly through muscle power alone. They used the planet's magnetic field as a form of lift assist. The organ in their chest generates a field that interacts with the planetary magnetosphere." David leaned forward, his exhaustion temporarily forgotten. "So flight is part biological, part electromagnetic?" "Exactly. And Ash's organ is damaged, which is why even with a functioning wing she'd struggle." Isla opened the case, revealing a small device about the size of David's fist. It was smooth, dark metal covered in circuitry. "This is a field generator. It's used in cargo ships to create localized gravity wells for handling sensitive materials. It's old, outdated, and I liberated it from a storage facility that was going to recycle it." "You stole it?" David asked, surprised. Isla had always been so proper, so by the book. She smiled slightly. "I borrowed it indefinitely without explicit permission. If we can modify it, tune it to dragon-specific frequencies, it might be able to supplement or replace her damaged organ's function." David picked up the generator, his mind already racing through possibilities. "We'd need to integrate it with the wing support frame. Make it part of a unified system instead of separate components." "Exactly. The frame stabilizes and supports the physical structure. The generator provides the electromagnetic lift assist. Together they might work where separately they'd fail." Isla pulled up schematics on her datapad. "But there's a problem. We'd need to interface the generator directly with her nervous system. Let her control it instinctively. The way she'd control her natural organ. That requires biocompatible neural connectors and programming I'm not qualified to do. David studied the schematics, his engineer's mind dissecting the problem. The connector technology exists. They use it for advanced prosthetics. He gestured at his own crude arm. I couldn't afford those when I needed them, but I've read about how they work. As for the programming, that's just adaptive algorithms. If I can code a navigation system from scratch, I can handle that. They worked through the night, Isla providing biological parameters while David designed the mechanical integration. Ash watched from nearby, sensing this was important, occasionally moving closer to inspect their work. The new design was elegant. The frame would attach to Ash's wing at key stress points, providing support without restricting natural movement. The generator would mount against her chest, connected to the frame through flexible conduits that would not impede her flexibility. Neural connectors, hair-thin wires, would link the generator to nerve clusters in her shoulders, allowing her to control the electromagnetic field as naturally as breathing. It's going to cost more than we have, David said, tallying up the materials they needed. The neural connectors alone would consume what little credit he had left. I have some savings, Isla offered. Research doesn't pay well, but I've been careful. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. This is important, David, not just for Ash. If this works, it proves that dragons written off as worthless can be saved. It challenges the entire breeding industry's practices. Isla's voice was firm. Let me help. David nodded, grateful and humbled. Okay, let's build something impossible. The work consumed the next month. David fabricated each piece of the frame with painstaking precision, testing and retesting every joint, every connection point. He programmed the adaptive algorithms, running thousands of simulations to ensure the field generator would respond correctly to Ash's neural commands. Isla handled the biological side, preparing Ash for the procedure, building her strength, explaining everything to the dragon in calm, patient tones. The day of installation arrived. David had cleared the largest section of his workshop, sterilized everything Isla insisted needed sterilizing. Ash would be sedated for the connector implantation, a risk that made David's hands shake as he prepared the equipment. She trusts you, Isla said, watching him work. That's the most important part. She has to believe this will help her, or the stress alone could kill her. David approached Ash carrying the sedative injector. The dragon looked at him with her golden eye, calm and trusting. He knelt beside her, his throat tight with emotion. This is going to help you fly, I promise. But it's going to hurt first, and you have to sleep through the worst of it. Do you trust me? Ash lowered her head and pressed it against his chest, right over his heart. David took that as his answer. He administered the sedative, and Ash's eyes slowly closed. Her breathing deepened. She was out. The procedure took 6 hours. Isla guided David through the connector implantation, each wire carefully threaded through muscle and tissue to reach the correct nerve clusters. David's hands were steady, his prosthetic arm locked into position to serve as a stable platform for his tools. They attached the frame, secured the generator, ran diagnostic checks on every connection. When they finished, David was shaking with exhaustion. Ash lay still, her breathing steady but her body covered in their modifications. The frame looked like part of her now. Organic and mechanical merged into something new. Now we wait, Isla said, packing up her medical equipment. The sedative will wear off in a few hours. Then we'll see if the connections took. David did not leave Ash's side. He sat beside her, monitoring her vital signs, watching for any sign of rejection or complications. His mind conjured 1,000 ways this could go wrong. Infection, neural rejection, system failure. He had bet everything on this working, including Ash's life. Ash's eye opened as the twin suns of the neighboring system rose outside the station viewports, painting the workshop in orange light. She blinked slowly, confused. Then she tried to move, and David saw the moment she realized something was different. The frame moved with her, responding to her intent. The generator hummed to life, a sound felt more than heard. She stood, wobbly at first, then with growing confidence. She extended both wings, and for the first time in years, they spread evenly. The damaged wing was supported by the frame, the torn membrane reinforced with flexible synthetic material that moved like her natural scales. Ash turned her head to look at the wing, then at David. She made a sound, loud and trumpeting, that David had never heard before. It was joy, pure and unfiltered. Not yet, David said, laughing and crying at the same time. We need to calibrate the field generator, do a systems check, make sure everything is stable. But even as he said it, he knew they had done it. They had taken broken parts, impossible problems, and built something that should not work, something that did work. Ash folded her wings carefully, testing how the frame responded. She walked around the workshop, her movements more confident than David had ever seen. She was not whole, not the way she had been born, but she was something new, something stronger. David rested his hand on her neck, feeling the warmth of her scales. Tomorrow we test the systems, he said. And if that works, we teach you to fly. Ash rumbled her agreement, and David felt it through his whole body. Hope was a dangerous thing, but standing there in the morning light with his impossible dragon, David let himself believe they might actually succeed. The cargo bay on Station Meridian's lower level had been abandoned for months. Budget cuts meant some sections of the station ran on minimal power, and this bay had lost its environmental contract when the primary shipping company moved to a competitor station. David had negotiated with station management, paying a small fee to use it for testing. It was not much, barely 300 meters long and 20 high, but it was the largest enclosed space available. Ash stood at one end of the bay, her wings folded tight against her body. The frame gleamed in the harsh emergency lighting, and the field generator cast a faint blue glow across her chest. David had spent the last week running system checks, calibrating the electromagnetic output, teaching Ash how to consciously activate and control the generator. She learned fast, her damaged organ seeming to recognize the artificial supplement as an extension of itself. Remember, David said, standing beside her, his hand on her neck. Start slow. The generator will feel different from natural flight. Let it guide you. Don't fight it. Isla stood near the bay entrance with her medical equipment ready for any emergency. She had invited no one else, understanding that Ash needed privacy for this moment. If she failed, if she fell, she did not need an audience to witness her humiliation, but word had spread anyway. Station gossip was faster than any communication system. People knew the human mechanic had been working on something unusual. They knew he had a dragon, a worthless one. And somehow, despite David's efforts at secrecy, people had found out about today's test. David heard them before he saw them. Voices echoing through the corridors leading to the bay. He turned and saw figures gathering at the observation windows above, station residents drawn by curiosity. His stomach dropped. Ash, we can wait. Do this another day. The dragon made a negative sound, a sharp snort. She had waited 3 years in a cage. She would not wait another day. She stepped away from David, moving toward the center of the bay. Her claws clicked against the metal deck, each step deliberate and purposeful. More people arrived. David spotted some of his regular customers, engineers he had worked with, shop owners who sold him parts. Then he saw the Saurians, the 3 nobles who had given him Ash as a joke. They pushed through the crowd, their crests raised in amusement. The human thinks she will fly, the largest one announced to anyone who would listen. This will be entertaining. David clenched his jaw, forcing himself to ignore them. This was not about proving anyone wrong. This was about Ash reclaiming something that had been taken from her. He activated his comm link. Ash, can you hear me? The dragon tapped her tail once against the deck. Yes. Okay. On your signal. Take your time. David's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his prosthetic arm, the sensors there picking up his elevated pulse and making the hand twitch. Ash extended her wings slowly. The frame moved with her, servos whispering as they compensated for her damaged membrane. The synthetic material caught the light, creating a patchwork pattern across the torn sections. She looked strange, this combination of organic and mechanical, natural and artificial. She looked perfect. The field generator's hum increased in pitch. Ash was activating it, feeding power into the electromagnetic field. David watched his datapad, monitoring the output levels. Everything was green. All systems nominal. Ash began to run. Her powerful legs pushed against the deck, building speed. Her wings beat once, twice, the frame providing support where her damaged membrane would have failed. The field generator pulsed, creating localized distortions in the station's artificial gravity. She left the ground. For one beautiful second, Ash was airborne, her wings spread wide, her body suspended in defiance of everything that said she should be grounded forever. David heard himself shout, a wordless sound of triumph. Then the frame's left strut buckled. The support gave way with a sound like breaking glass. Ash's damaged wing collapsed, the membrane tearing further under the sudden stress. She twisted in midair, trying to compensate, but momentum was against her. She hit the deck hard, her body tumbling, the frame scraping across metal with a horrible screeching sound. David was running before his mind caught up with his body. He reached Ash in seconds, dropping to his knees beside her. She was alive, breathing hard, her eye wide with shock and pain. The frame was mangled on the left side. The strut that failed now bent at an impossible angle. Blood seeped from where the twisted metal had cut into her shoulder. No, no, no. David muttered, his hands hovering over her, afraid to touch and cause more damage. Isla, I need help here. Isla was already there, her medical case open. She worked quickly, injecting pain medication, examining the wound. It's not deep. The frame took most of the impact. She'll be okay physically, but Ash was not okay. David could see it in her eye, in the way she curled into herself. She had tried. She had dared to hope, and she had failed, in front of everyone, just like they all expected. From above, laughter echoed through the bay. Worthless dragon stays worthless, one of the Saurians called down. Human tricks cannot fix bad breeding. David felt rage like he had never known. He stood, turning toward the observation windows, his fists clenched. His prosthetic arm locked up from the tension, freezing at an awkward angle. He wanted to scream at them, to tell them exactly what he thought of their breeding programs and their cruelty. But Ash made a sound, a low whine that cut through his anger. She needed him. The spectators did not matter. David knelt again, pressing his forehead against Ash's neck. I'm sorry. This is my fault. The frame wasn't strong enough. I should have reinforced that joint. I should have tested it more. Ash shifted, pulling her head back to look at him with her golden eye. She made a sound, soft and insistent. David had learned her vocalizations over the months. This one meant again. What? She pulled away from Isla's medical work, struggling to her feet despite the pain medication making her movements sluggish. She dragged her damaged frame behind her, limping back toward the center of the bay. Ash, no. You're hurt. We need to remove the frame. Treat the wound properly. David followed her, trying to guide her back to where Isla waited. The dragon refused. She positioned herself where she had started, her wings trembling with effort and pain. She looked at David and tapped her tail twice against the deck. Now. You can't fly with the frame broken. It won't work. It'll hurt you more. David felt tears burning his eyes. Please let me fix it first. Let me make it right. Ash made a sound that was almost a growl. David had never heard it from her before. It was frustration, determination, and something else. It was the sound of someone who had spent too long being told what they could not do. Isla approached carefully. David, look at the frame. The left side is gone, yes, but the right side is still functional. And the field generator is undamaged, David looked. She was right. The left strut had failed, but the right side of the frame remained intact. The generator still hummed against Ash's chest, still responding to her neural commands. She can't fly asymmetrically. The imbalance would be impossible to control. For a normal dragon, yes. But Ash has been flying asymmetrically her whole life, compensating for her damaged wing. Isla met his eyes. She knows her body better than we do. If she thinks she can do this, maybe we should trust her. David looked at Ash, at the determination in her eye, at the way she held herself despite the pain. She had survived 3 years in a cage. She had endured procedures and failures and the laughter of people who thought she was worthless. And she was still here, still fighting, still refusing to give up. Okay, David said quietly. Okay, but we do this smart. Let me run a diagnostic on what's left of the frame. Make sure nothing else is about to fail. He worked quickly, his datapad connected to the frame's control systems. The right strut was solid, all connections secure. The generator output was actually higher than before, as if Ash was pouring more power into it to compensate. Everything's stable on the functional side. But Ash, you'll have to fly with your left wing mostly unsupported. It's going to hurt. It's going to be hard. Ash tapped her tail once. She understood. She did not care. The crowd above had grown larger. More people had heard about the crash and come to watch the aftermath. David could hear their conversations, their speculation about when the human would give up. Ash did not wait for David's signal this time. She ran, her injured shoulder protesting but her legs strong. She beat her wings, the right side supported by the frame, the left struggling with only partial assistance from the generator's field. She was lifting, the electromagnetic forces fighting against gravity. This time, when she left the ground, she did not fall. She flew crooked, her body angled to compensate for the asymmetric lift. She wobbled, dipped, nearly crashed into the bay wall. But she corrected, her instincts and determination overcoming mechanical imperfection. She climbed higher, her wing beats uneven but effective. The laughter from above died. People watched in stunned silence as the crippled albino dragon circled the cargo bay, her flight ungainly but undeniable. She was not graceful. She was not elegant. But she was flying. David felt something break loose in his chest, relief and pride and joy all mixing together until he could not tell them apart. He was crying and laughing and his prosthetic arm was sparking from some overloaded circuit. But he did not care. Ash completed one circle of the bay, then another. She was getting better with each pass, learning how to use the modified frame, how to compensate for what was missing. On her third circle, she dove, swooping low over the spot where David stood. He could feel the wind from her wing beats, could see the fierce joy in her golden eye as she passed. She landed roughly, her damaged shoulder buckling again. She collapsed onto the deck, sides heaving, exhausted and hurt, but she was making that rumbling sound, the one that meant happiness. David rushed to her side, Isla right behind him. They removed what remained of the broken frame, treated her wounds, checked her vitals. Ash bore it all patiently, her eye never leaving David's face. From above, the crowd erupted, not in mockery this time, but in something else. Cheers, applause, shouts of amazement. Even some of the Saurians looked stunned, their crests flattened in confusion. David barely heard them. He pressed his forehead against Ash's neck, feeling her heart beating strong and steady beneath her scales. You did it. You actually did it. Ash made her happy sound again, and David understood. She had not just flown. She had proven that broken did not mean defeated. That worthless was a lie told by people who gave up too easily. We'll build a better frame, David promised. Stronger, balanced, perfect. You'll fly like you were born to. But even as he said it, he knew the truth. Ash would never fly like she was born to. She would fly better. She would fly like someone who had earned every meter of altitude through pain and determination, and refusing to believe in impossible. She would fly like a dragon who had been told she never would, and decided to prove everyone wrong. News traveled fast in the outer colonies. Within a week of Ash's flight, David's workshop received its first visitor, a merchant from 3 sectors away, leading a dragon on a chain. The creature limped badly, one hind leg twisted from an old injury that had healed wrong. Can you fix him? The merchant asked, desperation clear in his voice. The breeders say he is worthless, but he was my father's dragon. I cannot just let him die. David looked at the dragon, saw the same resignation in its eyes that Ash had carried. I can try. But I need to be honest, it will take time and most of my materials. I can't promise success. Everyone said you fixed the impossible. The albino who cannot fly now flying. Please, at least try. David took the case. Then another came. And another. Within a month, his workshop had a waiting list. Dragons that were injured, malformed, or simply too old for their owner's purposes. Some people offered payment. Others had nothing but hope. David took every case he could manage, sleeping 4 hours a night, living on coffee and stubbornness. Isla helped when she could, but her own work demanded attention. She brought David a warning on a cold morning, her face tight with concern. The Dragon Breeders Guild filed a formal complaint with station management. They are claiming your modifications violate interstellar animal welfare laws. David looked up from the frame he was building, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Welfare laws? These dragons were going to be killed. How is saving them a violation? They argue that your modifications are unnatural, that you're creating suffering by forcing dragons to live with mechanical augmentations. Isla handed him a data pad with the legal documents. It's nonsense, obviously, but the guild has money and political influence. They're making noise. David read through the complaint, his anger building with each paragraph. This isn't about animal welfare. They're scared. If people realize damaged dragons can be repaired, their entire breeding business model collapses. Why breed for perfection when you can fix imperfection? Exactly. Which is why they're going to fight you. Isla sat on his workbench, pushing aside a pile of circuit boards. David, you need to be careful. These are not kind people. They've been breeding and selling dragons for centuries. They have resources you can't imagine. That night, David worked late on the frame for the merchant's dragon. Ash slept in her corner, her improved frame allowing her to rest comfortably for the first time in years. The new design was better, balanced, using everything David had learned from the first prototype's failures. He did not hear them enter. He only noticed when Ash made a warning sound, a low growl that raised every hair on David's neck. He turned to find 3 figures in his workshop, their faces hidden behind breath masks, their hands carrying equipment that was definitely not standard repair tools. "Leave," David said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "This is private property." The center figure stepped forward, holding a device that looked disturbingly like a large injector. "The dragon is suffering. We are here to end that suffering humanely." David moved between them and Ash, his prosthetic arm sparking as he clenched his fist. "You're not touching her. She is an abomination. Machines and flesh should not mix. We do this for her own good." The figure advanced and the other 2 moved to flank David. Ash was on her feet, her wings spreading despite the confined space. The generator hummed to life, electromagnetic fields distorting the air around her. She made a sound David had never heard, something between a roar and a scream, and it was full of rage. The attackers hesitated. Whatever they expected, it was not a dragon who could defend herself. Ash lunged forward, her teeth snapping centimeters from the center figure's arm. The 3 intruders scrambled backward, retreating toward the door. "This is not over," one of them hissed before they fled into the corridor. David locked the workshop door, his hands shaking. He checked Ash over, making sure she was unharmed, then sent an emergency message to Isla and station security. When the security officer finally arrived an hour later, he took a statement with obvious disinterest. "You can't prove who they were," the officer said, a bored Tyrellian with mandibles that clicked while he talked. "Could have been anyone. Lots of people think modified dragons are unnatural. They tried to kill my dragon. That's attempted destruction of property at minimum. File a formal complaint. We'll investigate." The officer's tone made it clear nothing would come of it. After he left, David sat with Ash, his back against her warm side. "They're going to keep trying. They'll find a way to stop us." Ash made a questioning sound. "I don't know what to do," David admitted. "I can't fight the guild, I'm just a mechanic." "They have lawyers, money, influence," his comm unit chimed. An incoming message from an address he did not recognize. David opened it cautiously, and his stomach dropped as he read. It was an invitation. The grand trials on Draconic 7, 6 weeks away. The message was formal, polite, and absolutely a trap. The guild wanted him to bring Ash to their homeworld, to compete in front of the entire dragon breeding establishment. "They want to humiliate us publicly," David said, showing Ash the message. "Prove that modified dragons can't compete with purebreds. Discredit everything we've done." Ela arrived an hour later, having received a copy of the same invitation. "You can't go. It's too dangerous. The guild controls everything on Draconic 7. "What happens if I refuse?" David asked. "They'll use it against you. Claim you know your modifications don't work, that you're afraid of real competition." Isla paced the small workshop, her mind working through scenarios. "But if you go and fail, they'll have proof that modified dragons are inferior. They'll probably get laws passed banning what you're doing." David looked at Ash. She was watching him with her golden eye, waiting for him to decide. He thought about the merchant's dragon, still waiting for repairs. He thought about all the other broken dragons sitting in cages waiting to be killed because they were not perfect enough. "We have to go," he said quietly. "If we don't, they win by default. At least this way we have a chance. A chance to what? You can't win. The trials are designed for dragons bred specifically for competition. Even if Ash performs well, the judges are all guild members. They'll never rule in your favor." Isla's voice was strained with frustration. Maybe winning isn't the point. David stood, moving to his workbench where new frame designs were scattered. Maybe the point is showing everyone who's watching that broken dragons can still fly, that they deserve a chance. Over the next 6 weeks, David rebuilt Ash's frame from scratch. He used every lesson learned, every failure, every success. The new design was a work of art, lightweight but incredibly strong, with redundant systems and adaptive algorithms that would adjust to Ash's movements in real time. He sold everything he owned that was not essential, even his ship, to pay for the best materials he could get. Isla helped with Ash's training. They worked on endurance, on speed, on maneuverability. Ash grew stronger, more confident. She would never fly like a purebred dragon, but she flew like herself, and that was enough. The day before they were scheduled to leave for Draconic 7, a group of station residents arrived at David's workshop. They were people whose dragons David had helped, whose machines he had repaired, whose lives he had touched in small ways over the years. "We heard you need transport to Draconic 7, said the merchant whose dragon David had fixed. The creature walked now with only a slight limp, and its eyes were bright with health. "I was going to book passage on a freight hauler," David said, confused by the group. "No need, we are going with you. All of us." The merchant gestured to the others. "You helped us. Now we help you." David felt his throat tighten. "You don't have to do this. The guild will not be happy with anyone who supports me." An older woman stepped forward, her dragon beside her. It was missing part of its tail, lost in an accident. David had designed a prosthetic that helped with balance. "That dragon saved my granddaughter's life when our habitat dome breached. They wanted to kill her because of the tail. You gave her a reason to keep fighting. We stand with you." They left Station Meridian on a small fleet of private ships, an unlikely convoy heading toward the heart of dragon territory. David sat in the lead ship with Ash in the cargo hold, her new frame gleaming, her breathing steady and calm. Through the viewport, he watched the stars slip past and thought about everything that had led to this moment. A rigged card game, a broken dragon, a decision to try when everyone said it was pointless. Isla sat beside him, running final checks on Ash's medical data. "Whatever happens on Draconic 7, you've already changed things. People are questioning the guild's authority. They're asking why dragons have to be perfect to deserve life." "It won't mean anything if we fail," David said. "It will mean everything," Isla corrected. "Because you tried. Because you refused to accept that broken means worthless." David looked back toward the cargo hold where Ash waited. She was not perfect. She would never be perfect. But she was alive, and she could fly. And she had taught David something important about stubbornness and hope and refusing to believe in impossible. Draconic 7 appeared ahead, a green and blue world wrapped in storm clouds. Somewhere on that planet, the guild was preparing their trap. They expected David to fail. They expected Ash to prove that modifications were inferior to natural breeding. David smiled, feeling Ash's presence through the connection they had built over months of work and trust. Let them expect failure. He and Ash had made a career of proving expectations wrong. The ship descended toward the planet's surface, and David felt the gravity shift, the magnetic field pull. Ash would feel it too, her natural and artificial systems already adjusting, preparing. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Broken things refusing to stay broken, and that, David thought, was the most human thing he could imagine. Draconic 7 smelled like rain and old stone. David stood in the competitors' area, watching dragons being prepared for the trials. They were magnificent creatures, each one a perfect specimen of their bloodlines. Their scales gleamed with health, their wings were flawless, their movements confident and powerful. Handlers fussed over them, adjusting harnesses and checking claws. Ash stood beside David, drawing stares and whispers. Her pale scales marked her immediately as the outsider. The frame on her back, the generator glowing against her chest, these made her an object of fascination and disgust in equal measure. Some handlers pointed and laughed. Others looked away as if the sight of her offended them. "Ignore them," David muttered, checking Ash's systems one final time. Everything showed green on his datapad. The frame was functioning perfectly. The generator was synchronized with her biology. They were as ready as they would ever be. A Saurian official approached, his crest decorated with gems that marked him as high-ranking in the guild. "David Ross, human, entry 47, he looked at Ash with barely concealed contempt. "Your dragon will compete in all standard events, speed trial, combat simulation, endurance run, and the storm gauntlet. Any failure to complete an event results in disqualification. Do you understand?" "I understand," David said evenly. "Good. Your first event begins in 1 hour. Try not to embarrass yourself too badly." The official walked away, his tail swishing with satisfaction. Isla appeared from the crowd, carrying water and nutrition packs. "I've been listening to the other handlers. The guild stacked the competitions with their best dragons. Every participant here is either a champion or a rising star. They want Ash to look as bad as possible by comparison. Then we'll just have to do our best." David fed Ash one of the nutrition packs, watching her eat. She was nervous. He could feel it through their connection, the one that had formed over months of working together. But underneath the nerves was determination. The first event, the speed trial, was simple in concept. Dragons would fly a course marked by floating beacons racing against the clock. The fastest time won. David watched 3 dragons complete the course before Ash's turn, each one a blur of speed and power. The current best time was 43 seconds. Ash ready? David stood at the starting line with her, his hand on her neck. She tapped her tail once. Yes, the starting horn sounded and Ash launched herself into the air. Her takeoff was not as smooth as the purebreds, her asymmetric frame causing a slight wobble. But once airborne, she found her rhythm. The generator hummed, supplementing her natural electromagnetic sense, and she banked through the first turn with precision. David watched on the ground display, timing her progress. She was slower on the straightaways, her damaged wing and mechanical assistance not quite matching the raw power of natural dragons, but on the turns she was different. The frame allowed her to bank at angles that should have been impossible, taking lines through the course that pure dragons could not manage without losing speed. Ash crossed the finish line at 47 seconds. Not the fastest, but respectable. Solidly middle of the pack. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some applauded politely. Others booed, calling her modifications unfair. That was good, Isla said, reviewing the data. Her turn efficiency was actually better than the leaders. If she had more power on the straights, she doesn't, David interrupted gently. And that's okay. We're not trying to win everything. We're just trying to prove she belongs here. The combat simulation came next. Dragons faced holographic opponents displaying their agility and tactical thinking. It was not about violence, but about maneuverability and decision-making. Ash struggled here. Her modified flight style made some evasive maneuvers difficult, and her damaged eye created a blind spot that the simulation exploited. She finished in the bottom third. The crowd's response was louder now. More boos, more laughter. David heard someone shout, "Send the broken thing home." He clenched his jaw and focused on Ash, helping her land, checking her over. "That was harder than expected," he said quietly. "You okay?" Ash made a frustrated sound but tapped her tail once. She wanted to continue. The endurance run was a grueling test of sustained flight over a 50-kilometer course. Dragons had to maintain altitude and speed without rest. It was designed to eliminate the weak, to prove which bloodlines had superior stamina. Ash started strong, finding a comfortable cruising speed that the frame and generator could maintain indefinitely. The purebred dragons pulled ahead quickly, their powerful wing beats carrying them faster. But endurance was not about speed. It was about refusing to quit. 30 kilometers in, dragons started dropping out. The pace was punishing. The course deliberately routed through areas of turbulent air. Ash struggled through the turbulence, her smaller size making her vulnerable to wind gusts. But the frame held, and the generator adjusted its output automatically, compensating for the difficult conditions. At 40 kilometers, half the competition had withdrawn. Ash was still flying, her movements showing fatigue but her determination unshaken. David tracked her progress on his datapad, monitoring her vitals. Her heart rate was elevated but stable. The frame's power cells were at 60%. She could finish. Ash crossed the finish line at 48 minutes, placing 7th out of 23 starters. The crowd was quieter now. Grudging respect replaced some of the mockery. A modified dragon, one that was not supposed to fly at all, had outlasted purebreds worth fortunes. David met her at the landing area, throwing his arms around her neck. "You were amazing." 7 others couldn't even finish. But Ash was staring past him toward the final event board, the Storm Gauntlet. The ultimate test, the one that separated champions from pretenders. David followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. The Storm Gauntlet was insane. Dragons had to fly through an electromagnetic storm, a natural phenomenon on Draconic 7 where the planet's magnetic field went chaotic. The storms were deadly to electronics and disrupted dragon flight organs. Only the strongest, most skilled dragons attempted it. Many died trying. "You don't have to do this," David said firmly. "You've proven enough. We can withdraw from this event." Ash made a negative sound, sharp and final. She was not withdrawing. "Your generator uses electromagnetic fields. The storm will disrupt it. Your natural organ is damaged. You'll be flying blind with no assistance. David grabbed her head, making her look at him. Ash, this could kill you. She touched her snout to his chest, right over his heart. Then she looked toward the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. She was going. Isla pulled David aside as they prepared. I've been studying the gauntlet records. Most dragons can't complete it because the electromagnetic interference overwhelms their flight organs. They lose orientation, can't maintain altitude. But Ash's organ is already damaged. She's been flying without it for months, relying on the generator, which the storm will shut down, David said. But she knows how to fly without electromagnetic assistance. The frame provides physical support independent of the generator. If she can navigate through the interference, if the frame stays functional, she might actually have an advantage. Isla's voice was urgent. Normal dragons depend on their organs. Ash learned not to. David looked at his dragon, at the determination in her golden eye. She had spent 3 years unable to fly. She had endured surgeries and failures and the contempt of everyone who saw her, and now she wanted to fly through an electromagnetic storm that could kill her, just to prove she could. It was the most human thing he had ever seen an alien do. Okay, David said. Let's set the frame to manual override. If the generator fails, she'll still have physical support. And we'll coat the electronics in insulation. It won't protect completely, but it might help. They worked frantically, David's hands steady despite his fear. He had built this frame. He knew every circuit, every connection point. If Ash was going into the storm, he would make sure she had every possible advantage. The storm gauntlet began at sunset. 12 dragons entered, the bravest and most skilled. The storm clouds churned on the horizon, lightning crackling through them in bizarre patterns. David stood at the edge of the course, watching dragons launch one by one. The first 3 made it partway through before the interference became too much. They lost control, tumbling from the sky. Emergency crews caught them with nets, but 2 were injured badly enough to withdraw from future competitions. A massive purebred, champion of 3 consecutive trials, entered the storm. It fought valiantly, its powerful wings beating against the chaotic winds. It made it 3/4 through before the electromagnetic pulses overwhelmed its organ. It fell, crashing into the safety barriers below. Ash's turn came. David walked with her to the starting point, his throat tight with fear and pride. You can do this. I believe in you. Ash launched into the storm without hesitation. David watched on the tracking display, his hands gripping the datapad so hard the casing creaked. Ash's signal flickered as she entered the worst of the interference. Inside the storm, Ash felt her generator sputter and die. The electromagnetic chaos was too much, overloading the sensitive equipment. For a moment she panicked, old fears rising, but then she felt the frame, solid and reliable, supporting her wing. She felt her own muscles, strengthened by months of training. She felt the determination that had carried her from a cage to the sky. She flew without the generator, using only the frame and her own strength. The storm battered her, wind and rain and electromagnetic pulses that made her scales stand on end. But she had flown through worse. She had flown with a broken body and a broken spirit. A storm was nothing compared to that. She emerged from the other side, her frame sparking and damaged but functional, her body exhausted but alive. She had completed the storm gauntlet. The crowd erupted, not in mockery this time, but in genuine amazement. David was running before he realized his legs were moving, reaching Ash as she landed hard, her legs barely holding her weight. He threw his arms around her neck, feeling her heart thunder beneath her scales. You did it. You actually did it. He was crying, not caring who saw. Isla ran up, her medical scanner already active. She's okay. Exhausted, some electrical burns from the storm, but nothing serious. She looked at David with tears in her own eyes. Do you know what she just did? She completed a course that killed dragons 10 times more valuable than her. The guild officials were in chaos. They had not prepared for this outcome. A modified dragon, completing the impossible trial that their champions had failed. The head official approached, his expression unreadable. David Ross, your dragon has completed the storm gauntlet. This is unprecedented. David stood, keeping one hand on Ash. She has a name. Use it. The official's crest flared with irritation, but he complied. Ash has completed the storm gauntlet. By the rules of the trials, she is officially ranked among the competitors. What's her overall placement? David asked. 12th, out of 23 starters. The official delivered it like an insult, but David heard it as a victory. 12th place when she was supposed to be worthless. 12th place when purebreds worth fortunes had failed. But the official was not finished. However, the Guild Council will be reviewing the legality of mechanical augmentations. Your dragon's participation may be retroactively disqualified. Before David could respond, a voice cut through the crowd. She will not be disqualified. An elderly Saurian pushed through. His scales faded with age, but his presence commanding respect. David recognized him from research he had done. Lord Crimson Wing, one of the oldest and most respected breeders in the guild. Lord Crimson Wing, this creature is... The official began. This creature completed the Storm Gauntlet, the old Saurian interrupted. Something my own champion failed to do. She did it with courage and determination that would honor any bloodline. He approached Ash, studying her with ancient eyes. I have bred dragons for 70 years. I have seen thousands of hatchlings. Most are perfect in body but weak in spirit. This one has a spirit of fire. He turned to the crowd, his voice carrying across the arena. The guild has become obsessed with perfection. We cull the weak, discard the flawed, breed only for physical traits, but we have forgotten what makes a dragon truly great. Heart, will, the refusal to surrender. He gestured to Ash. This dragon was thrown away. A human saw her value when we did not. That is our shame, not hers. The crowd was silent. The official looked like he wanted to argue but did not dare contradict a lord of the guild. Lord Crimson Wing continued. I propose a new division of the trials. For dragons who have been modified, repaired, given second chances. Let them compete fairly, judged on their own merits. And let us as breeders remember that perfection is not just in the body but in the spirit. The crowd erupted in debate, some supporting, some opposing. But the seed was planted. Change had begun. David barely heard it. He sat with Ash, checking her frame, treating her wounds, making sure she was okay. Isla joined him, and together they worked in comfortable silence. Finally, as the sun set and the crowd dispersed, David looked at Ash. What you did today, you changed things. Not just for yourself. For every dragon that's been thrown away because they weren't perfect enough. Ash made her happy sound, tired but content. Over the following weeks, David's workshop on Station Meridian was flooded with requests. But now they came with official backing. The guild grudgingly had approved a program for dragon rehabilitation. David was offered funding, a larger workspace, assistance. He accepted some offers, refused others. He would not let the guild control his work. More importantly, dragons who had been scheduled for destruction were given a reprieve. Handlers who had mocked David now asked for his advice. Breeders began questioning their own practices. David stood in his expanded workshop watching Ash teach a younger dragon how to use its new frame. She was patient, encouraging, using the same determination that had carried her through her own struggles. She was not just surviving anymore. She was helping others survive. Isla appeared beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. You look satisfied. I am, David said. This is what I wanted. Not glory. Just to prove that broken doesn't mean worthless. You proved more than that, Isla said. You proved that sometimes the broken things are the strongest, because they had to fight harder to become whole. David sipped his coffee and watched Ash fly circles around the workshop, her white scales catching the light, her frame gleaming. She was not perfect. She would never be perfect. But she was alive and she was free. And she was teaching the galaxy that perfection was overrated. They had laughed when they gave him a crippled albino dragon. They had called her worthless, broken, a waste of resources. But David had seen past the damage to the spirit underneath, and together they had made her fly again, not despite her imperfections, but because of them. Because she had learned that falling was just practice for getting back up. That broken things could be fixed in ways that made them stronger than before. That the most human thing was refusing to accept impossible. Ash landed beside David, her eye bright with joy. He scratched her neck, feeling her contentment through their bond. You ready for the next one? He asked, gesturing to a dragon waiting nervously in the corner. Ash tapped her tail once. Yes, always yes. Because what flies cannot be caged, and what hope cannot be broken, and what love cannot be measured by the perfection of bodies, but by the strength of spirits that refuse to surrender. David smiled and got back to work. There were more dragons to save, more impossible things to make possible, and he had learned from the best teacher, a crippled albino dragon who taught the galaxy what it meant to truly fly.